Governor, it's very nice to visit with you.
My pleasure.
We serve on a body together, Think Long.
We did.
And I suspect it's still in existence. It's just dormant for the moment. We also served in the legislature together. People may not know this, but Gray Davis, your first activity with me was what, Governor?
I remember serving with you from 82 to 86.
No, not serving.
Working with you.
What was your first activity?
Oh, first activity, I was Chief of Staff to Jerry Brown for about 6.5 years, from 75 to late 81. And
now see, he's slipping because his first activity with me was my driver. You remember that?
Apparently I blocked it out.
I must tell you a story. In the world of politics, I think Governor Davis will agree, it's really measured by how long the relationships. And when I reference the occasion of his giving me a ride, it was a Tom Bradley campaign for mayor. And I was invited down in the early 70s, and somebody had to take me around and show me the ropes. And it was Gray Davis who took me around to show me the ropes. And he's been doing that for the rest of his life.
That's right.
He's been taking me around and showing me the ropes. And on this day, we want to talk, I think, and have a conversation.
And let me tell you how that pays off later in life. When I was Chief of Staff to Jerry Brown, then Assemblyman Brown became Speaker during that process. And I said, and we had kind of a contentious relationship with the former Speaker, Leo McCarthy. He was a wonderful man, but you never know where there's going to be chemistry and where there isn't. Just like in marriage, you never know when two people are going to find happiness and when they're not. So Jerry said, well, should we do this a little differently this time with the new Speaker? I said, yeah, let's keep it simple. Whatever Willie wants, Willie gets.
Over the years, the relationships have only flourished and ended up with the governor, of course, as described in his resume, doing the tour de force for the state of California, from the earliest entry into state politics to the ultimate as the governor of the state of California. And on the occasions when the state has about a 16 or 17 billion dollar deficit, the talent of a Gray Davis is woefully missed. Governor Davis, you are now governor of the state of California, and there was a 15, 16, 17 billion dollar report that came to you from your Department of Finance. What exactly would you do first?
Well, I hope I would do what our current governor is doing, which is leveling with people and presenting them what amounts to a workout plan. The legislature and the governor made about $10 billion cuts. Recall, Mr. Speaker, that Jerry Brown inherited a $26 billion deficit, which we thought was down to 10, but is down to 16 billion. So they're going to have to find ways to make further reductions to eliminate that 16 billion. Plus, he has on the ballot a revenue increasing measure that will generate, I think, $8 to $9 billion. So for about a 7-year period. So it is a balance of further cuts and revenue increases. That's a lot easier to say in the abstract, as we both know, than when you're actually eliminating a given program which has a constituency, people who depend on it. Sometimes it's, life-sustaining assistance. But at the end of the day, we have an obligation as elected officials to not only govern for the moment, but for the long haul. And I care about what happens to you. I also care about what happens to your children and their children. And I have long believed that we can't just tax our way to prosperity. We have to grow our way to prosperity, and we have to realize that government is in the service business. Yeah, people have to pay their taxes. By the way, I mentioned to the Speaker when the Franchise Tax Board was announced and got a round of applause, I said, There are very few audiences where the taxing authority gets a round of applause. So you know you're dealing with tax professionals when that happens. But coming back to my point, you want this to be a state where someone who has a dream can pursue that dream. Not they have to get 55 permits and it takes them 7 or 8 years to start up a little 2 or 3 person startup that may be a Facebook or a Google or a Twitter or lead to the iPod or the iPad. You want to encourage them, help them, assist them. You want to root for them to succeed, because guess what? When they grow, they hire more people. They invest more in their plant and equipment. They invest more in research. They have more consultants, more lawyers, tax lawyers, everything. So I think government has to understand we're not here just to suppress, to contain, to tax, to slow down, to regulate. We're here to nurture and to grow and to encourage as well. I'm not saying all those things I mentioned previously don't have a purpose. They do. If I could stop these remarks with one comment that Jerry Brown made at his inauguration back in January of 2011. He said, you know, I don't know if he used the word risk averse, but we are getting awfully risk averse as a society. Can you imagine what the people had to do who came from the 13 colonies to come to the West? The dangers they encountered. He told the story, he was trying to prove to people that he was not too old and not to dismiss the possibility he might run for a second term. So he says, I have a 99-year-old aunt here. Her mother came across the plains on a covered wagon. 13 people in that party died. When they got to the West, if you were interested in mining gold, you had something to do. But if you weren't interested in that, you had to start a new life. But they had hope, they were willing to take risks, they had big dreams, and they incurred hardship and sacrifice that we'll never even know. So I guess my message in a nutshell is, you know, life brings you good times, it brings you bad times. Just deal with it, get over it. We're in a bad time now, and we have to find a way to encourage people to start businesses, hire people, generate revenue. We cannot just add taxes because that will, over the long term, drive people away and not make this a positive place in which to live and to raise a family and start a business. So I hope what I would do is what Jerry Brown did. We got cuts we have to make, we have revenues we have to raise, and then we have to try and get on a sustainable path, which is a path that requires us to live within our means.
Governor, you left the governorship in 2003, and at that time, there was a number on the budget side, but that number has obviously increased since you left. Share, if you will, a moment of what that number was and how you think it has gotten to be so outrageously much larger.
According to the San Jose Mercury, which was doing some wrap-up stories on Arnold, who I happen to like, I'm friends with, I happened to talk to him a couple days ago. When I left office, the budget deficit was about $10.5 billion, and the general fund was just under $100 billion. The budget, when Jerry Brown took office, the deficit was 26 billion, so 10 to 26, and the general fund had shrunk from about 100 billion down to about 86, 87 billion. So we have a larger deficit and a smaller pie. So again, you need to develop a plan that doesn't just get you into the next fiscal year, but provides a sustainable path going forward. And I believe California does great things. I'm a big bull on California. It's a fabulous place to live. I tell everyone, within 45-minute drive in the Bay Area, you can be at Facebook, you can be at Google, you can be at Apple, you can be at Yelp, you can be at Intel, Oracle, Cisco, you know, Berkeley, Stanford, UC San Francisco. All that stuff, that energy, that research, that talent, that innovation, coupled with entrepreneurs and venture capital, that's what makes stuff exciting. And people go to work, and the speaker and the mayor know, in Silicon Valley, and they go to work believing they are going to change the world. And guess what? Sometimes they do. We would not have had an Arab Spring without, with government crackdown on communication and censorship without, Facebook and Twitter. Facebook is 8 years old. Twitter is 5 or 6. Yelp is younger than that. So this steady stream of innovation, new ideas, which changes the world, comes out of this state. And I tell you that because while we have problems with people in Sacramento, we have an ability to take academic innovation, commercialize it, make it into products, which arguably allows us to claim the mantle as at least America's chief innovator, if not the world's chief innovator. But to do that, you can't bleed your universities dry, you can't force all the professors to leave, all the researchers to go because they can get better paid someplace else. You have to recognize what it was that allowed the Silicon Valley itself to exist, much less clean tech, green tech. We get every year more venture capital than any other state, and some years more venture capital than all 49 other states combined. So all of that is an outside validation that our research capability, our ability to innovate is recognized around the globe by scientists who come out here, professors who come out here, investment capital that comes out here. But to do that, you have to have a good educational system and you have to have very good universities, and of course that costs money. So I left the deficit more than doubled, the general fund shrank. And I'm not blaming people, but those are just numbers you have to live with. Jerry Brown hopefully will get us on a path that we can live with for a long time to come.
Governor, you talked about the reality of the deficit growing to 26 or so billion, and the general fund going down,
shrinking, right.
and shrinking at the same time. What are the factors that really contribute to that kind of a conclusion?
Well, each recession has a different explanation, but in this case, it was all the subprime housing, all the Wall Street, does some good things, does some bad things. In this case, this was a bad thing, slicing, whatever it was, tranches of mortgages. I kept hearing all this stuff about, well, say good mortgages and bad mortgages, but they're all get a AAA rating. How can that be? If you have bad mortgages, how can, anyway. So that was the primary source of our economic downturn. Most people don't realize this, Mr. Speaker, and everyone used to ask me this question as governor. They said, what's the most important part of the California economy? Is it Hollywood or is it Silicon Valley? I said, those are both very important, but the most important part of the California economy is housing. Housing employs brokers and realtors and title companies and escrow companies and contractors and people building houses and appliances and everything that goes into housing. And obviously the property taxes go up when you build a new house because there's more value there. So that is an engine that's very important to our economy. And so, in a word, the housing slump, the housing slowdown, all the problems with some of the mortgages both being sold around the world and also countrywide and its problems, all that led to a major meltdown from which we have not fully recovered. Even housing starts really are nowhere near what they were 3 or 4 years ago, and it probably will not be for another 4 or 5 years, although there are some interesting little signals here, what do they call them, green shoots, interesting things the first quarter that suggest it's slowly getting a little better.
During the time that you served as governor, you had to produce budgets, and invariably that required, because of the 2/3.
Remember in those days. Remember in those days that you needed a 2/3 vote to pass a budget, even if it didn't have a tax increase. You needed a 2/3 vote. Now the people have just changed that a couple years ago to make it a majority without a tax increase.
Why don't you share what tools that you used in order to fashion that 2/3 majority with people who are constantly, I think, being challenged for tax purposes and tax-paying purposes.
Well, first I would call Willie Brown and say, how the hell did I get in this mess, and how can I get out of it? And then he would give me a series of good ideas. You know, when you're, even now when there is a majority vote, obviously the legislature, everybody there is elected. They're all trying to do a good job. They're all trying to promote their best interest of their district and hopefully the state. So nobody has it one way. The governor can want something, but it doesn't mean he or she's going to get it. When I was governor, I had to deal with the Republicans because their votes were necessary to pass the budget. So sometimes you have to plant in their mind the seed of a solution and cause them to believe it was their idea. Because I get no credit as a governor if I propose something that the Republicans will say, well, why do we need to, it's the governor's idea. I mean, we need to demand some stuff from him that he doesn't want to do. So you want to make sure that those demands include a few things you can actually do. So I'll give you one example. Remember Jim Kineen? Jim was a Republican assemblyman from Silicon Valley in '99 and 2000. And he came to me and he says, Governor, I'd like to vote for your budget, but I just want to tell you, very important in my part of the state that there be a better research and development credit. Then it was 9%. I think over a series of 5 years, we moved it up to 14%. I said, Jim, I 100% agree with you, but if I propose it, your caucus won't give me any credit. So why don't you say that you raised this issue with me, and I was kind of tight-lipped, I didn't really respond, but you think if the Assembly Republicans put that on their demand list, say if there's top 3 things, you know, maybe we could persuade Davis to go along with the idea. So sure enough, it turned to be on their top 3 list. That allows me to go to the Democrats, who would rather shoot themselves than give tax relief to corporations. Am I telling the truth here? When I came into politics in the 70s, we had a very good form of economic development. I'm sure you remember this, Mr. Speaker. Our slogan in California was, you're lucky we let you in. Now that might have worked in the 70s for a whole bunch of reasons I won't get into, but it certainly doesn't work now. And in fairness, you know, the Democrats as a majority party have done some good things in terms of incentives, but it's a little late to the program in terms of the competition that we face. In any event, then I could go to the Democrats and say, look, we got to give the Republicans something. I mean, one of the 3 things they want is basically tax incentives to do more research. I mean, John Vasconcellos, you're here, chair of Ways and Means. You represent Silicon Valley, and Byron Scheer, you represent Silicon Valley. So I said to these people, these are your companies. I mean, we've got to give them something. This seems like a good thing to give them. So anyway, we were able to get the Democrats to come on board. The Republicans came on board. So that is one way you can try and get a meeting of the minds by just planting a seed in someone's head that if you demand this of me, I might not, but I might go along with it so that one of the demands is something you can accept. Because if the demands that they make of you are unacceptable, then you've got a real problem. So you got to get at least something on that list that you can live with and that you think you can persuade the Democrats to live with.
How much